Every single one of us has been there. That moment when we think, maybe this isn't worth it. The resistance is too strong, the path feels too steep, and there's a voice, subtle but persuasive, whispering, just stop. This isn't for you. And often we do. We quit. We rationalize, we tell ourselves it wasn't the right time, or maybe I'll try again later. But the truth is, quitting isn't about timing or talent. It's about belief, or rather the lack of it. The moment we quit, what we're really saying is, I don't believe this is worth it anymore. And more often than not, we don't even realize what we've walked away from. I met a young man a few years ago, brilliant, sharp, full of ideas. He had a vision to build something that would help underserved communities gain access to better education using mobile technology. He was passionate. Every time he spoke about it, his eyes lit up. You could feel the conviction in his voice. But a few months later, I saw him again, and he had given up. When I asked why, he shrugged and said, it just got too hard. But what he really meant was the clarity of his why faded. The challenges clouded his vision. He forgot the reason he started. He forgot the people he set out to serve. You see, the reason so many of us quit isn't because we aren't capable. It's because we haven't deeply connected with our reason for continuing. And when we don't have that clarity, the pain outweighs the purpose. The moment adversity shows up, we retreat, not because we're weak, but because we've lost sight of the bigger picture. There's a reason athletes push through pain. There's a reason entrepreneurs work 16-hour days on something that might not pay them for years. There's a reason artists keep creating despite criticism. It's not because they enjoy the struggle, it's because their reason for doing it is bigger than the resistance they feel. They've anchored themselves to a cause, a purpose, a mission that matters more than their comfort in the moment. When you quit, you're not just abandoning a task, you're abandoning a future version of yourself. That version that's stronger, wiser, more disciplined, that version that was born the moment you decided to try. And every time you walk away, every time you surrender to the easy path, you widen the gap between who you are and who you were meant to be. The weak version of you wants instant relief. It thrives on the illusion that stopping now will make everything better. But it won't, because the discomfort of persistence is temporary, but the pain of regret is a lifetime sentence. Ask yourself this: when did you last remember why you started? Not what you wanted to achieve, but why. The purpose, the cause, the reason that first made your heart beat faster. That's your fuel, and if you lose that, you lose everything. One of the most dangerous lies we tell ourselves is that motivation is all we need. Motivation is cheap. It shows up when things are easy. What you really need is meaning. Because meaning stays when everything else walks away. When you feel like quitting, you're standing at a fork in the road. On one side is the easy exit, immediate relief, the comfort of stopping, the sweet silence of not having to try anymore. And the other side is the harder choice, continuing, despite the chaos, despite the fear, despite the unknown. And the only thing that makes the second path bearable is knowing why it's worth it. If you ever look back at something you gave up on and felt regret, not just for the result, but for who you could have become, you know this truth. We don't regret failure. We regret surrender. We regret walking away when we still had more to give. I remember once talking to a woman who had started a small nonprofit to help foster youth transition into adulthood. It was difficult. Funding was scarce, support was inconsistent, every day brought new challenges. She had every reason to quit, but she didn't. I asked her why. Her answer stuck with me. She said, because I promised myself I'd be the person I needed when I was that age. And I can't break that promise. That's what why does. It becomes a promise, a contract between who you are and who you want to become. And keeping that promise is what separates those who keep moving forward from those who walk away. You don't need to be the smartest, fastest, or most talented. You need to be clear. clear on what matters, clear on who you're doing it for, clear on why this can't wait, because when you're anchored in a cause bigger than yourself, quitting stops feeling like an option. It feels like a betrayal. So the next time that weak version of yourself shows up, and it will, and it whispers that maybe it's time to walk away, ask it one question. What am I really quitting? Not just a goal, not just a plan, but a future, a mission, a promise, a belief that something better is possible. And if your answer still matters to you, if your why still burns, then don't you dare quit. You're not fighting to complete a task. You're fighting to become someone worth believing in. And that is always worth it. We like to imagine that the biggest battles we face in life are out there: competition, critics, a lack of opportunity, circumstances beyond our control. But the truth is, the fiercest battle is the one happening quietly every day inside our own minds. It doesn't wear armor. It doesn't shout. It whispers. And it sounds like reason. It says things like, "You've done enough. You're not made for this." Oh. Who are you kidding? It knows exactly when to show up, right when things get hard, right when you've taken one too many hits, right when progress seems invisible and the payoff feels too far away. That voice, that part of you that doubts, that hesitates, that wants to run, it's not a stranger. It's you. But not the real you. It's the weak version, the one that learned a long time ago that safety comes from shrinking, from retreating, from quitting. That part of you was born from fear. It develops not to hurt you, but to protect you. When you were a child and the world was overwhelming, it told you to hide. When you were rejected, it told you to never try again. When you failed, it convinced you that avoiding risk was the smarter path. And maybe at one point in your life, that voice helped you survive. But survival is not the goal anymore. You're not here to make it through. You're here to become something more. And that weak version of yourself, the one that defaults to quitting when discomfort shows up, isn't helping you anymore. In fact, it's the very thing holding you back. The most dangerous thing about that version is not how loud it is. It's how familiar it feels. Because it doesn't sound like an enemy. It sounds like you. It borrows your voice. It knows your patterns. It knows exactly where your breaking point is, and it's gotten good at steering you there, again and again. I spoke once with a man who had tried to write a book for almost a decade. He started and stopped over and over. Every time he'd get a few chapters in, he'd convince himself it wasn't good enough, that no one would care, that he wasn't really a writer, and he'd quit. Not because he didn't have the talent, but because the version of him that feared rejection always won. I asked him one question: whose voice is that? He paused, and then he said, "It's mine, but it's not me." That's it. That's the distinction. There's a version of you that wants more, that dreams bigger, that's willing to try, to fail, to bleed for the chance at something meaningful. And then there's the version that just wants to stay safe, the one that's afraid of pain, of being seen trying and falling short, the one that would rather quit than risk becoming someone better. And that's the enemy, not the world, not your circumstances, you. But here's the good news. Since that weak version of you lives inside, you don't need anyone else's permission to face it. No one needs to save you. You have everything you need already. You just have to decide which version of you gets to lead. Every time you feel like quitting, it's not a sign you're failing. It's a signal that the weak version is trying to take the wheel. That's the moment to lean in, not back away. Because the only way to kill that part of you is by starving it. And you starve it by doing the thing it fears most: continuing. Courage isn't loud. It's often quiet. It's getting up when no one's watching. It's doing the work when no one claps. It's saying not today to that voice that tells you to walk away again and again until it gets quieter. It's not about perfection. It's about resistance. Consistent, deliberate resistance to the instinct to give up. I once watched a friend of mine train for her first marathon. She was not an athlete. In fact, she was someone who had avoided physical challenges her whole life. But something shifted in her. She wanted to prove to herself that she could follow through. The training was brutal. Her body hurt in ways she didn't expect. And that inner voice screamed louder with every mile, This isn't you. You're not built for this. Just stop. But she didn't. Not because she was physically stronger than everyone else, but because she made a decision. She would not let that weaker version of herself be the one who finished the race. Mile by mile, she outran it. Not with speed, but with stubbornness. And when she crossed that finish line, she didn't just win a medal. She buried the part of her that always quit. That's what this is really about. Not achievement, but transformation. You don't beat the inner enemy by yelling at it. You beat it by proving it wrong. You beat it by doing what it says you can. You beat it every time you show up, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it. That weak version of yourself isn't permanent. It doesn't get to define you unless you let it. It will always be there, whispering its familiar script. But now you get to choose whether to listen or not. You get to decide which voice wins. You are not the voice that wants to quit. You are the one who keeps going despite it. And every time you choose not to quit, every time you show up anyway, that weak version of you gets smaller. Weaker until one day it's not in control anymore. It will never disappear completely, but neither will your strength unless you stop using it. So the next time you feel that pull to quit, don't ask yourself if you're tired. Don't ask if it's hard. Ask this: which version of me do I want to feed right now? The answer to that question might just change everything. We've been told a lie so often that we've started to believe it. The lie is this: that the people who win, who achieve, who endure, who build something meaningful are somehow gifted with better circumstances. That their road was smoother, their luck better, their obstacles smaller. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. The people we admire didn't get there because of their circumstances, they got there in spite of them. Not because the path was easier, but because they made a different choice when things got hard. Life will always present circumstances you can't control. You don't choose your upbringing, your setbacks, your failures, or the timing of unexpected storms. But you do choose how you respond. And it's in those moments, when things go wrong, when plans fall apart, when progress is invisible, that the real divide is revealed. Not between the lucky and the unlucky, but between the ones who choose to keep going and the ones who don't. I met a man once who had grown up in a rough part of town. Drugs. Violence. No safety net, no mentors. If you looked at his life from the outside, you'd say he didn't stand a chance. Statistically, he should have ended up like so many others around him. Angry, broken, defeated. But he didn't. He got out, he built a business, he gave back to his community, and when I asked him how, he didn't tell me about some magical break. He said, one day I realized I couldn't control where I came from, but I could control where I was going, and I started making choices like someone who mattered. That's it. That's the difference. We're all shaped by circumstance, but we are defined by choice. When things get hard, and they always will, it's easy to say, this isn't fair. It's easy to say, they don't know what I'm dealing with, and maybe they don't. Maybe your mountain is taller than theirs. Maybe the weight you carry is heavier. But the decision to keep climbing is still yours. You are never powerless. You might not control the weather, but you can still lace up your boots and take the next step. There's this quiet, dangerous belief that discipline, resilience, and persistence are traits some people are born with. They're not. They're muscles, they're habits, they're small decisions made again and again until they become part of who you are. No one is born with the ability to keep going when it hurts. They choose to train that ability. And they do it in the dark, when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, when quitting would be easier, but they keep showing up anyway. That's what separates the strong from the comfortable. Choice. Not ability, not background. Choice. I remember a woman who had battled through multiple failed businesses. Each one hit her hard. Financial losses, emotional burnout, public embarrassment. But she didn't stop. She learned, she adjusted, she launched again. Eventually she found the right model, the right team, the right rhythm, and it worked. People asked her how she got so lucky. She laughed. Not because it wasn't hard, but because people only saw the final product. They didn't see the years of choosing to rise after every fall. She said something I'll never forget. Quitting was always the easier option. But I never wanted to build a life that was easy. I wanted to build one I could be proud of. Every time we hit a wall, we face a decision. Do I let this stop me or do I adapt? Do I stay down or do I rise? Do I wait for the conditions to be perfect or do I move with what I've got? Your circumstances are the stage, but the performance, that's all you. Here's something else no one tells you. The people who seem the strongest are often battling the hardest. What makes them admirable is not that they never feel like quitting. It's that they choose not to. Even when they're exhausted, even when they're afraid, even when no one would blame them for walking away. They don't keep going because it's easy. They keep going because they remember what they're fighting for. When you feel like quitting, it's not a flaw in you, it's a crossroad. It's your moment to choose. And in that moment, your decision holds power. Real power. Because you are casting a vote for who you want to become. Every single time. And over time, those votes compound. They shape your character. They build your legacy. You won't always feel strong. You won't always feel inspired. But feelings are fleeting. Choices last. Choosing to persist even in small ways, even on the worst days. That's how progress happens. That's how the weak version of you starts to lose its grip. It doesn't take a hero to choose differently. It takes a moment of clarity. A moment where you remember that your future is not a matter of fate, but a series of decisions made in difficult moments. You might not control the size of your challenges, but you control your response, you control your commitment, you control your consistency. That's where your strength lives. So the next time you catch yourself looking at someone else's life and thinking they had it easier, pause and ask yourself, what choice am I making right now? Because your life is not defined by what happens to you. It's defined by what you do next. The weak version of yourself wants to point fingers. The stronger version wants to take responsibility. The weak version waits for permission. The stronger one creates momentum. And the choice between them is yours every single day. You don't become extraordinary by accident. You become extraordinary by choosing to keep going long after others have stopped. And if you want to change your life, stop waiting for the world to change and start changing your choices. There's a word that often gets misunderstood. It sounds cold, rigid, mechanical. We associate it with strict rules, early mornings, uncomfortable choices, and saying no when everything in us wants to say yes. That word is discipline. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? Discipline isn't punishment. It isn't about deprivation. It's not about forcing yourself to become a machine. Discipline is something far more profound. It's love, not for who you are now, but for who you're becoming. It's love in its most practical daily form. It's saying, I care enough about the person I'm becoming that I'm willing to do the uncomfortable thing today. Think about it. When you love someone, truly love them, you show up for them even when it's inconvenient, even when it costs you, even when no one else sees. That's what discipline is. It's showing up for the version of you that doesn't exist yet, but could if only you kept your promises to yourself. The weak version of you, the one that always quits, lives in the now. It chases relief. It wants to feel good right now, even if it comes at the cost of what you really want long term. It's the voice that says sleep in, even though you promised to train. It says start tomorrow, even though you've already delayed it for a week. It tells you one more scroll, one more snack, one more excuse. And in the moment, those choices feel harmless, but over time they shape your identity. Every time you choose comfort over commitment, you're writing a letter to your future self that says you weren't worth it. Discipline is the opposite. It's writing a letter that says, I believe in you. I'm willing to make sacrifices for you. I'm willing to feel discomfort now so that you can feel proud later. I remember sitting with a friend who had just completed a year of waking up at 5 a.m. to work on his craft. He had a full-time job, a family, and no guarantees that his efforts would lead to success. But he did it anyway, every day. No fanfare, no applause, just a quiet decision to do what he said he would do. When I asked him how he stayed consistent, he said something I'll never forget. I didn't feel like doing it most days, but I kept a picture of who I wanted to become in my head. And every action was a vote for that person. That's what discipline is vote daily, consistently, deliberately for the version of yourself that you know is buried under the noise, the fear, the distractions. And here's the thing, discipline isn't something you wake up with one day. It's not gifted. It's not a personality trait. It's built moment by moment through small decisions that most people will never see. You build it when you choose to show up to the gym when no one's keeping track. You build it when you sit down to study, even when your motivation is gone. You build it when you say no to the temporary thrill that would sabotage your long-term goal. An ever-disciplined action is a brick. And over time, those bricks form a foundation, a life you can stand on with pride. But here's the challenge. Discipline doesn't offer instant gratification. There are no immediate fireworks, no finish line after one good decision. That's why it's hard, because we're wired to crave results now. But the most valuable outcomes in life, the ones that truly matter, are never immediate. Confidence, mastery, freedom. They are all lagging rewards. You don't get them from doing something once. You get them from doing it again and again, long after the excitement has faded. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you want to become. Without it, every dream, every goal, every version of your best self stays trapped in potential, untapped, unlived, unrealized. And let's be honest, there will be days when you don't feel like it. Days when the bed is warmer than the grind, when the excuses feel more persuasive than the reason you started. That's okay, you're human, but that's where the difference is made. Because discipline doesn't ask, do you feel like it? It asks, do you care enough to keep going anyway? This isn't about being perfect. It's about being faithful to the work, to your word, to the vision you once said mattered. Because if you can't keep a promise to yourself, how can you trust yourself to build anything meaningful? The strongest people you know, those who seem unshakable, aren't stronger because life gave them an easier path. They're stronger because they kept showing up, especially on the days they didn't want to. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for motivation. They made a decision, and they honored it. Repeatedly. And you can too. You don't need to be extraordinary. You don't need to be the best. You just need to be willing. Willing to care about your future enough to act in the present. Willing to choose discomfort now in exchange for pride later. Willing to trade temporary pleasure for lasting meaning. Because the weak version of you, the one that keeps quitting, it doesn't need to be fought. It needs to be outloved. It needs to be replaced, not with willpower, but with compassion for your future, with commitment to the person you promised to become. Discipline is love. Not the soft, easy kind, but the hard, honest kind. The kind that says you deserve more than what feels good right now. So next time you're tempted to quit, to skip the rep, break the fast, ignore the plan, hit snooze, pause and ask, am I honoring the future me? Or betraying them, and then act like someone who cares, because that's who you really are. There's something we don't realize about quitting. We think it's isolated. We think it's just this one time. This goal doesn't really matter. This moment isn't a big deal, but that's not how it works. Every time you quit, you teach yourself that quitting is an option. You reinforce a pattern. You condition yourself to believe that backing down is acceptable when things get uncomfortable. And that pattern doesn't stay in one area of your life. The truth is, every action you take is a signal to your subconscious, a message, a lesson. And whether you realize it or not, you're always teaching yourself what kind of person you are. Are you the person who follows through, even when it's hard? Or are you the one who caves the moment resistance shows up? Most people don't understand the power of this internal message. They think quitting is just a temporary relief from discomfort. But quitting doesn't just remove the pain. It removes the possibility. I spoke with a young athlete once who had all the talent in the world. He started strong, he showed promise, but when the training became hard, when he wasn't winning right away, he walked away. Not with anger, not with frustration, just quiet resignation. It's not for me, he said. But when I talked to him later, months after he'd quit, he admitted something. The problem isn't that I couldn't do it. It's that now I don't believe I'll ever follow through on anything. I've taught myself to quit. That hit me, because quitting isn't just the end of one attempt. It's the birth of doubt. It's the erosion of belief. And once you start teaching yourself that quitting is an answer, it becomes the answer to everything uncomfortable. That relationship gets tough, walk away. That business doesn't grow fast, shut it down. That goal doesn't deliver fast dopamine, ditch it. And before long, you start living a life of short sprints and incomplete chapters. You never find out what's on the other side of persistence because you never stay long enough to see it. People think discipline is what keeps us going, but discipline is built on something deeper, identity. When you believe you're someone who quits, discipline can't take root. It withers because your foundation isn't strong. So you have to start by shifting the identity. You have to stop allowing quitting to become who you are. There was a man I knew who had struggled with his health for years. Every January he'd start strong, new gym plan, new diet, new habits. And by February it was gone. He'd laugh it off like it was some running joke. Oh, well, maybe next year. But it wasn't funny because each time he quit, he became more convinced that change wasn't for him. That discipline was something other people had, that success belonged to a different category of person. And every time he started again, he had to fight not just the new challenge, but the weight of every past failure he had taught himself to believe in. It took one shift to turn it around, one small promise he made to himself. And this time, he kept it. He committed to walking every day for 30 days. That was it. Not losing weight, not transforming his body, just one walk, 30 days, no excuses, no try, just do. And when he finished, he didn't become a different man overnight, but he became someone who could trust himself again. And that changed everything. You want to build self-confidence, you want to kill the weak version of yourself that keeps quitting, then you need to start making and keeping small promises over and over. Because confidence doesn't come from affirmations. It comes from evidence. And the strongest evidence is your own behavior. Every time you follow through, even on something small, you cast a vote for the version of yourself that you respect. You say, I finish what I start. You say, I show up when it's hard. You say, I don't need perfect conditions to make progress. And those small wins stack, they grow, they become a new story, and that story changes your future. But the opposite is also true. Every time you say, I'll do it later. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you reinforce the identity of a quitter. You tell yourself, I can't be trusted. And eventually you stop even trying, not because you don't want it, but because deep down you no longer believe you're capable of seeing it through. This isn't about perfection. This is about consistency. It's about being someone who can endure the long game, someone who understands that the real reward isn't just achieving a goal. It's becoming the kind of person who refuses to give up on what matters. And this matters. Your goals matter. Your dreams matter. You matter. And every time you choose to keep going instead of quitting, you're not just making progress, you're becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone you respect. It's not always about massive action. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply not give up today, just today. You don't need to see the whole path. You just need to take the next step and then the next. And in doing so, you begin to rewrite the pattern. You begin to silence that weak version of yourself that says, let's give up. And you replace it with a voice that says, not today. Today we finish. One decision, one promise, one refusal to quit. That's how you build the life you want. Not by waiting for motivation, not by hoping for easier circumstances, but by choosing again and again to act in alignment with the person you know you can be. The world doesn't need more starters. It needs more finishers. Be the one who finishes.